Hello, everyone, and welcome to NCARB Live. I'm Nick Respecki, and I work on the examination team at NCARB. For those of you who have engaged with our ARE 5.0 community, you may know me as Nick NCARB. Now, I'm not here alone. You'll notice two additional faces up on the screen. I'm here with two other NCARB experts, Jared Zurn and Casandra Walker. Now, to kick things off, I'm going to have each of you just give a quick intro on yourself and talk about what you do at NCARB. So let's start this off with Casandra.
Hi, this is Casandra Walker. I am the Assistant Vice President of Customer Relations, and my goal is to support your examination journey by answering phone calls and emails with my team.
And my name is Jared Zurn. Hello to everybody. I'm the Vice President of Examination here at NCARB. I've been with NCARB now going on 12 years, so I'm very intimately involved with not only ARE, all aspects of ARE 5.0, but understand the transition from 4.0 to 5.0 as well.
Great. Well, thank you, Jared and Casandra. So over the course of the next hour, our goal today is to answer your questions related to the Prometric test center closures, rescheduling appointments, rolling clock extensions, and then all the other questions you may have for NCARB during these challenging times. And if you're wondering how you ask us directly questions, what we want you to do is go ahead and log into your Gmail or your YouTube account, and then use the chat tool to submit these questions. For some of you, you're going to see this option below the video being streamed, and for others, it's going to be to the right-hand side. So go ahead over the course of this webinar and submit those questions to us. Now, before we jump in to answering your questions, I'm going to pass it over to Jared to give a brief update on where Prometric and the ARE stand as of today, April 30th. Jared, take it away.
Thanks, Nick. So
Looks
what we
good,
did is,
Jared.
at NCARB, we put together some slides to cover some of what we think are going to be the basic questions a lot of candidates have right now. So I'm going to run through those to start, and then we're going to start taking any questions you have after that. So first thing to understand is we have had some policy updates around ARE once we went into this COVID-19 situation starting back in March. Over the course of the end of March and into April, we've made the decision that all candidates that had a valid passing score as of March 1, 2020 are receiving a total of a 9-month rolling clock extension. That's being automatically applied to everyone's score, so you don't have to do anything to receive this. They're going to be fully implemented by the end of this month. The other thing we've done from a policy perspective is we've waived rescheduling fees. So don't worry about any rescheduling that's coming up. If you're not comfortable to go into test and you'd rather reschedule for a later date, go ahead and do that. There's going to be no fee involved. Or if you have an exam scheduled out into the future and you actually find an available appointment time and you want to move it forward, feel free to go ahead and do that. It's not going to be impacted by any type of a rescheduling fee. So let's talk about current ARE delivery availability. And we know this is really the hot topic right now, and it's a little bit of a moving target, but the recent information we have from Prometric is that North America test centers are not going to be delivering the ARE during the month of May. So we know that the majority of our candidates do test in North America, and we know that they're not going to be able to test all throughout May. We understand that. There are some select global test centers that are starting to reopen. The first ARE candidate that has tested in the last 2.5 months actually took place on Sunday in Hong Kong. So global test centers are starting to reopen based on availability in their region. Candidates are going to be able to go in and test. North America test centers will begin delivering the ARE in June. So as of June 1, Prometric is allowing ARE candidates into the test center. But I will make a statement, a little caveat here, that we also know probably not all Prometric test centers in North America are going to open on June 1. It is likely that in some regions, in some hotspots, that there are going to be stay-at-home orders extended past June 1. So we are all going to have to be paying attention to what's happening in my region, what's happening at my local test center. Hopefully they're reopening on June 1, but it would not surprise me if some of them certainly are delayed maybe until like June 15th or later. So now talking about scheduling a future appointment, because we're also hearing about candidates that are wanting to take the exam, but they're running into some problems finding an available seat time. So the Prometric scheduler right now is only open through the month of October. So if you go in and you look for an appointment, you're only going to see availability out until the October timeframe. If you want to say, well, I want to just schedule something for a year from now, the reality is the scheduler is not going to even, if you go to those dates, it's going to look like every appointment is booked. It's simply because they haven't opened up their scheduler. So if you're looking for availability, think about from now through October. Available testing seats have been decreased to 50% capacity in the Prometric scheduler. Prometric, when they reopen now, are going to be implementing social distancing. And the way they're starting to do that is they're going to book only every other workstation, is how they're managing that. So when you go into the schedule, there is current limited availability for appointments. When you select a scheduled, so select June appointments, we know we had some candidates that had a lot of appointments scheduled for June because some of those March appointments had been rescheduled to June, even some of the April ones. So what ended up happening is that Prometric had overbooked their seats for June. They then had to go in and select some exams to be rescheduled to maintain social distancing. Prometric has informed NCARB of the candidates that have to be rescheduled. The good news, it was not 50%. It was only about a third of the appointments that were scheduled for June had to be rescheduled. The list that we have received from Prometric, those individuals we are attempting to contact right now. Emails were sent out earlier this week to impacted candidates, but we know some of the candidates did not receive those emails or haven't opened them because we're tracking information on this. So we are starting to follow up with phone calls from our customer relations team to make sure that you understand if your June appointment is going to have to be rescheduled. Some of you I know have appointments scheduled for the month of July and August, and we have confirmed with Prometric that there's a slight chance that, again, if social distancing is extended, we may even see some July and August appointments needing to be rescheduled. At this time, we haven't heard of any. Prometric is not informed of any July or August reschedules that are needed. If we hear of something, we'll let you know as soon as possible. And what we're doing is we're emailing you directly as a candidate. So one of the things we really want to stress today is that make sure your contact information is up to date inside of your NCARB record, and that you opt in and subscribe to our messages, because our email system checks that before it sends you an email. And if you've opted out of all NCARB communications, we're trying to communicate with you, and unfortunately those messages aren't getting to you. So lastly, the thing I want to talk about is when we return to testing. So once we get into June and July and candidates are able to go back into that test center, here's what you need to know. And this also applies to anybody who may be testing globally during the month of May. You will need to bring and wear a base covering at the Prometric Test Center. They are making this a requirement to be able to test. If you do not bring and do not want to wear a base covering, they are not going to they're not going to check you in for the appointment. They're going to document you as a no-show for that. And that is not something you want to have happen. So again, if you're not comfortable, if you don't want to wear a base covering, then please reschedule your appointment right now, because otherwise it's just going to lead to that conflict later on. When you do go to the Prometric Test Center, they are going to ask and they're going to check to see that you are not exhibiting any symptoms of COVID-19. So what they want to do is, now this also kind of depends on the test center. The Hong Kong candidate that I had referenced earlier, Hong Kong has implemented a policy that they have to take the candidates' temperatures at the local test center when they show up. Now, I haven't heard of anything like this being implemented across any of the US or North America test centers. But again, the more we learn, the more we'll share. So what's going to happen when you do go to that test center, it is going to be a little bit differently, act a little bit differently. They are going to ask you these questions about, have you been in a high risk exposure area anytime in the last 14 days? And if the answer is yes, they would actually, they're not going to allow you to be in the test center and take that exam. So if you end up in a high risk exposure area, again, please just reschedule your appointment in advance, and so you don't have that problem. And the last thing Prometric is doing is Prometric is implementing full social distancing at the test center. They're also implementing additional cleaning procedures in the test center, and they are going to be changing their check-in practices. So for those of you who have been in the test center in the past, prior to March, you're probably very used to the rhythm and the routine of checking in at the front desk and then going in and checking in outside of the testing center, the testing room, where they do the fingertip swipe and they have you do all that. Those things are going to start to be modified to maintain social distancing, even to the point where when you come to that test center and check in, they're basically going to be assigning you a pen that only you use that pen the entire time you're there. So that way you don't have to share equipment with other people that it hasn't been sanitized. When you're done, you'll like drop that pen in a bucket on the way out, and then they'll make sure that it gets sanitized before the next candidate ever would have access to it. So if you are testing in June, July, or in May in some of our global centers, do realize that those procedures inside of the test center are going to be different, and just sort of go with the flow, listen to what the test center administrator is asking you to do. They'll get you checked in as efficiently as possible and get you starting to take that test.
Well, great. Thank you for that, Jared. Now, as you were presenting, it looks like some questions are starting to come in from our viewers. And Jared, this one's for you, and I'm just going to jump right to it here. Candidates out there want to know when remote proctoring is going to be available. And there's a part 2 to that. Okay. When it does, and if it does become available, is there a way that they can help in the research and the testing of that remote proctoring option?
So Nick, we know this is a really big topic right now. NCARB has actually been investigating going to remote proctoring with the ARE over the last couple of years. So we had already anticipated that sort of being stuck in sites we know is limiting, especially for some of our candidates that don't live in major metropolitan areas. Like they have to drive well over an hour or more to get to the test center. So we've started to investigate remote proctoring. And the thing I will share is that all of our findings to date have been that the way the exam is currently structured and delivered does not work in a remote proctored environment. And the reason being is that we've taken the approach previously to provide as much flexibility to you, the candidate, while you're testing. And that's why when we switched over to 5.0, we implemented policies like take your break whenever you want. And those of you that have tested on the ARE know that you can navigate that exam any way you want. You can see question 1 and then go to question 7 and then go to question 15 and go back to question 1. That's a crazy idea, but you could do that if you wanted to. And that type of flexibility isn't going to work in a remote proctoring environment. So the good news I'm going to share is that I had the opportunity just last week to have a meeting with the NCARB board of directors where I was able to present to them a concept around evolving ARE 5.0 into an ARE 5.1. And that 5.1 is going to be a version of this exam which is restructured in a way that is going to support both on-site and remote delivery. And what I will tell you as a candidate is that yes, some of our policies and procedures are going to change to support remote delivery. The way you navigate that exam is likely going to change to support remote delivery. But what we're going to do is we're going to move in that direction so that way we can, make this exam as convenient and flexible for candidates wherever they live or whatever situations may be impacting delivery. So I'll follow up on the second part of your question, which was, well, how do you go about testing this? And are we looking for people to be pilot testers? And I will tell you that the answer is yes. In the future, we are going to be looking for pilot testers. But right now, NCARB is really in the midst of trying to restructure ARE 5.0. And until we kind of figure out that new format, we can't go into a pilot testing opportunity. But it is not uncommon. There's actually history. So well before my time at NCARB, I've read up on all the history of the ARE. And there was a time when NCARB was doing pilot testing pre-launch. Candidates who are participating in the pilot test, if they pass the exam, they get a passing score, and that's completely valid. So we may be reaching out. You may hear of opportunities in the future to say, hey, would you be willing to be a pilot tester to do remote delivery and remote proctoring? We'd explain to you what that means. But I'll tell you, it's going to be the real test. Like, it's not an easy version of the ARE if you're going to be taking it through remote delivery.
Great. Well, it looks like we have a question that just came in from Matthew, and he wants to know, currently the ARE is delivered at Prometric test centers. And his question is relating to, have we considered looking at non-Prometric locations? And then again, there's a part 2 to this. Has NCARB considered expanding those locations? Cassandra, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. Thanks, Nick. To my understanding, we are not exploring going outside of Prometric for the ARE 5.0, but it is an opportunity for us to think about that in the future. And expanding to other locations, was that the second part of the question, Nick? At,
Yes.
th- at this time, thanks. At this time, no, I do not believe we are expanding to other locations. As we explore, as Jared said, as we explore remote proctoring, that could be under consideration in the future. But right now, we are with Prometric, and they are with us.
So I'm going to ask the follow-up to that. Is there a reason why currently we know that Prometric has test centers all over the world, and we only deliver at a certain number of those test centers? Is there a reason specifically that we don't deliver at all of them, and there are only certain test centers that we deliver at? And Jared,
Yeah.
you have a follow-up?
I'll jump in and take that question. There are different types of Prometric test centers across their network. And we understand that can sometimes be confusing or frustrating to a candidate, because if you go to the Prometric website and you search for local test centers, you may say, oh, there's one right down the street. That's fantastic. And then when you go to schedule your ARE appointment, you find out, well, it never seems to be available down the street. It's only available, in this other test center. And the reason for that is because Prometric actually has different tiers of test centers, and those different tiers not only have different technology inside of them, they also have different security that they're able to facilitate. So we only deliver the ARE in what's considered their professional channel, which has the guaranteed 23-inch monitors, the guaranteed internet connectivity, the high-speed internet connectivity, and it includes all the security check-in procedures, including video recording of the candidate while they're taking their exam. Those lower tiered test centers, you may get in there and find out that you're looking at a 14-inch monitor. Then the next time you go back, you might be looking at a 17-inch monitor. There's not consistency, and that's not what we would want for our ARE candidates.
Okay,
and Nick, I'm going to actually add on a little bit to what Cassandra answered about. So is NCARB looking at other options? Well, Cassandra, the secret, which isn't going to be a secret in about 3 seconds, is that NCARB is starting to look at what other test center networks are out there, because our decision to say, hey, we want to look at a long-term future for ARE and this 5.1 concept, that really opens the door for us to look at some other opportunities. And I will say, yes, Prometric, we have been with Prometric for many, many years. I myself tested on the ARE at a Prometric test center, several years ago. And the reason being is Prometric provides the largest number of physical test centers in North America, and that's where we know our candidates are. Interestingly, when you open the door to a remote proctoring, that level of importance of the most physical test centers isn't the highest priority criteria anymore. So we are starting to look. I actually think that is something where we will be informing our candidates in the near future. If we decide to either add centers that aren't Prometric centers or switch to a different site administration, then we will obviously be updating our candidates about that as well.
Great. Well, now we have a question specifically relating to the slides that you presented at the beginning, Jared. In one of your bullet points, you mentioned that candidates would be required to have some sort of face mask as they go in covering. Now, the question is, are cloth masks acceptable for Prometric to go ahead and enter those test centers?
They will be. Prometric has identified to us that what they want is a face covering. So it could be a mask, it could be the N95 mask, it could be a medical type mask, or it can be any type of cloth face covering.
So we have a question that just came in from Kevin. And Kevin wants to know about the rolling clock. So it looks like his question is, the 9-month rolling clock extension won't be that helpful if there's no capacity for testing until mid-August. Is NCARB, or has NCARB considered offering additional rolling clock extensions if things tend to go on longer than, let's say, you get into August, you get into September, October, and that 9 months, well, we'll start brushing up against that 9 months very quickly. So has NCARB considered further extensions? And Cassandra, do you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So NCARB has been really proactive in ensuring that we are sharing information about the rolling clock extensions, and we're closely watching what's going on in different jurisdictions. And when we see things are moving rapidly or changes have come down from our local, state, and government, we are offering, and we will continue to look for opportunities to offer additional rolling clock extensions to support our customers' journey.
Now, along the rolling clock extension lines, what happens if a candidate doesn't have an exam that has been passed? So let's say they're a new tester, they've attempted maybe 1 or 2 exams, maybe they weren't successful in those exams. Does that rolling clock apply to them as
That's a
well?
good question. And no, it does not. You have to have an actual past exam for your rolling clock to have started. So if you don't have a past exam, you don't have a rolling clock available yet
Okay.
for us to extend.
Anything to add to that, Jared? Or
No, I mean, that really is what it comes down to. The best way to think about the rolling clock is always that it's an expiration on your passing score. So when you pass an exam, you pass a division, that division score is valid for 5 years to start. And then as long as you complete your remaining divisions, then you're done with the ARE. If you're unable to complete your remaining divisions within that 5-year window, then just that first division would expire. And that's why we call it a rolling clock, is because if you go 5 years, it's not like all of your divisions would expire. It really is only that first one. But like in the case now, we've given the 9-month rolling clock extension already. We will be considering other extensions in the future. And we know there's also extensions granted for birth or adoption of a child. People are dealing with medical and medical care issues, active military service, and other like causes.
okay, it looks like we have a question from Savannah, and she wants to know that people who are taking the ARE with accommodations are at a disadvantage because there are fewer exam slots for these tests. Is NCARB addressing this structural advantage giving to the typical tester? Is that something that we've thought about in all of this?
We have, so I'll take that question.
Okay.
So Savannah talks about something we call testing accommodations, and testing accommodations are available for a variety of different reasons. And it can lead to things like some additional testing time. Some candidates just need a separate testing room. That's the way it works. And that is something we really are paying attention to. And we've actually been working back and forth with Prometric for quite some time on this and bringing forward issues that we're seeing as impediments to our candidates. And so over the course of the last year, nursing mothers was really an issue at Prometric test centers. And in all honesty, we were putting a lot of pressure on them to make changes in their test centers to support giving nursing mothers that private space. And the good thing is they're starting to do, they're rolling out more private areas, screening inside of the test centers, things like that. Assessing a future partner and how they can support site administrations and support testing accommodations is a very big consideration for NCARB. And in all honesty, it's one of the things that to some degree excite me about remote proctoring, because I understand that as an individual, you may be able to control your environment in a much better way that fits your needs than Prometric is ever going to be able to. So if you're able to do that, if you've got this great environment already set up, why would we not want to let you test in that environment and make it as convenient for you as possible?
We have a question here from Allison about scheduling and availability within test centers. And I know this was covered at the beginning, Jared, when he talked about that Prometric, to maintain social distancing, they're going down to 50% capacity. But the question is really focused on, if I'm a tester today and I go and log into my record and attempt to schedule for, let's say, August, September, October, into the fall, is the availability within Prometric that shows in the scheduler, does that account for the 50%? And Casandra, do you want to take this one?
Yes. So as Jared said, the scheduler is open out until October, and they have already begun accounting for that constricted space. So once you go out to test or to schedule, you'll have an opportunity to do that and don't have to worry about making sure that you're selecting the right time or selecting the right area. That'll already be pre-done for you by Prometric.
So what happens if a candidate can't find space in their local test center, the typical test center that they go into, and they're not finding any appointments due to this social distancing? What would you recommend for them to do as far as finding potentially an available seat? Or is there anything that Prometric and NCARB are doing to address the potential shortage for appointments at Prometric test centers?
So Nick, I would think there's a couple of things that candidates can do in this situation. The first thing is, if you can't find availability at your local test center, you could investigate test centers that are in the region that might still be within a convenient distance for you to go to. I mean, I'm in no way suggesting that you're going to, get in a car and you're going to drive 17 hours to go to a Prometric test center. That is not realistic. But if you happen to be in an area where there's more than one test center and your sort of most convenient one isn't available, certainly investigate other test centers that you would find acceptable to travel to and take your exam. The other thing to do is to actually just, if you want, book the appointment that you see that's available, but then keep checking back for more open availability. Because the other thing that we've been going back and forth with Prometric, so we've been talking to Prometric about the expansion of their time that they're delivering the exam. Because today, not all test centers deliver exams, 7 days a week. Not all test centers deliver exams from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Some test centers have limited hours, some test centers have limited days. And so Prometric's going back and they're looking at expanding the amount of time that they're going to be offering seats. And when they can work with the local test center to expand hours, then all of a sudden that's going to become available inside of the scheduler. So again, if you, let's say this afternoon, you're looking for an appointment and you don't see anything that really fits your needs. Okay, that doesn't mean just give up. I think what that means is come back in a week or week and a half, check again, because all of a sudden you might see availability that wasn't there before. And that's because Prometric's looking at really trying to stretch the hours that they can stay open, but then still maintain that 50% capacity.
So Casandra, along those same lines, is there a recommended month or week that you would recommend that these candidates schedule in based on the current situation that everyone is dealing with?
Based on our current circumstances, I would do what's best for myself. So if you feel comfortable with going out further out into the scheduler, I would recommend going out September, October to look for open seating. And I think that would be, you would probably see less disruption as we get closer to fall and winter.
So we have a question from Ed on the 60-day waiting period after a failed division of the exam. That's a policy that is in place currently. Has NCARB considered waiving this policy or making any changes under the circumstances? Jared, do you want to take that?
Certainly. So under our current ARE 5.0, the 60-day policy is in place to basically limit the amount of exposures that a candidate is going to have to a certain version of the exam. So what Ed's going to learn is he's going to learn some of the behind the scenes aspects of the ARE in this question, in that Ed, every year NCARB only builds a limited number of versions of the ARE. And so on like a 12-month cycle, that's actually something Nick and I work on a regular basis is, okay, we've got to get the next, we call them a form of the exam. So we've got to get the next form out, and then we've got to get the next form out. And so what we're doing is the 60-day wait is what allows NCARB, and that's also why it's 60-day wait, but you can only test on the same division 3 times within any 12-month period. That allows NCARB to basically stay ahead of the candidates. So if they do test and unfortunately don't pass and have to go in and retest, then again, they're given a different set of questions. And then again, if unfortunately they don't pass and they go in and retest, they're given a different set of questions after that. So that's where the 60-day the wait policy comes from. And right now, under the current structure, we're not looking at changing that policy.
Jared, I'm going to come right back to you with this question because it's along the lines of sort of the NCARB policies, and it's regarding testing time. So each of our ARE 5.0 divisions now, when a candidate goes in test centers, they have a specified number of items, so questions that a candidate will see, and then a specified amount of time that they'll have to complete those items. So under the current testing environment, creating more stress for candidates, will NCARB or has NCARB considered adding additional testing time for exams going forward?
So we are not currently evaluating the idea of adding additional testing time to ARE 5.0. We do work with professionals that are called psychometricians. So these are people who have their advanced level degrees in measurement and analysis. And we do actually track testing time. That's one of, we call it speededness. in the testing world. So we track speededness across all of our different forms, all of our different questions, and then we build the exam in a way that falls within the time constraints that are outlined for the allotted amount of time. So right now, as far as ARE 5.0 is concerned, we are not anticipating changing anything related to the number of questions in each division or the amount of time. Now I'm going to tip my hand a little bit, Nick, and what I'm going to tell you is that when we look at 5.1, we are absolutely going to look at that. That is one of the things that we have a real opportunity at NCARB to say we've got a lot of data from 5.0. If you remember, 5.0 launched back in 2016. And so coming up on 4 good years of exam delivery, we've got a lot of data on our items. And what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at not only ways to possibly have less questions on the exam, so maybe they're not 120 questions anymore, maybe they're shorter, but also looking at how can we control timing? Because we have heard the timing question over and over again since we've launched 5.0. And so that is something NCARB is seriously considering. How do we adjust whatever the future iteration of this exam is going to be to fall more in line maybe with candidate expectations?
Good. So we have a question that specifically comes from an individual in Puerto Rico, and this also might apply to other coastal areas around the country that potentially could be impacted by hurricanes come fall. I know over the course of this webinar so far, we've been pushing our candidates to, and I know Casandra, you just answered a question about scheduling out in the fall as late as potentially you can. But what happens during hurricane season where coastal areas, Puerto Rico, could be impacted by hurricanes, limiting the availability for Prometric test centers? Has that been considered, or is this a similar response as, we're delivering the ARE in Prometric test centers that have the technology and the security capabilities at this point? Or are we doing something additional to address the issues that could arise during hurricane season? Casandra?
I think, yes, thank you. I believe that we would follow the normal procedures for hurricane season. And that would be to, if they are closed, then you should just stay in contact with Prometric, check their closed sites to ensure that you can test. Or if you can't, then we would have to find some, make some concessions for you based on weather conditions. So it would be business as usual as it relates to adverse weather.
Great. Jared, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I'll follow up because I also remember very much working through the last time Puerto Rico was hit by a major hurricane, and it was extremely disruptive. And we completely understand that at NCARB about, it was not, oh, the test center was closed for 3 days and then everything came back to normal. No, it was like that test center, had some serious damage. The internet connectivity to the test center was knocked out for months on end. And in those kind of situations, that's exactly when NCARB kicks into really a one-on-one candidate relationship issue where we're going to reach out to you, because it's not as simple in a major event like that to say, oh, we'll just wait. What we're going to do is we're going to reach out and say, here's what we know about you and your situation. Here are some options for you. And again, that could include just making changes inside of your NCARB record, adjusting your rolling clock specifically, and doing those kind of things.
So we're going to change gears here over to seat credits. So many of our viewers here probably know that to book an exam today at a Prometric test center, you first purchase a seat credit through your NCARB record, you find availability in a Prometric test center, and then you're able to schedule your appointment with that seat credit. Now, for test centers in North America, they've been officially closed since March 18th. And for many individuals, they've had to reschedule multiple times. And for them, they're getting a little frustrated with, oh, I'm going to have to continue to reschedule. Is there a way, instead of giving another seat credit and having them reschedule, that they can just get a refund so they can get those dollars back in their bank account? Does NCARB have any sort of policy, or have we thought about any policy? Casandra, do you want to?
Hi, yeah. So at this time, we are not equipped to offer refunds to our customers. And this is why we're giving replacement seat credits when they run up against Prometric closures. However, we do understand how frustrating it has been, and we empathize. And you have a year, that seat credit expires like about a year from the date of grant or purchase. So you can schedule out as far as you need in order to keep the seat credit. But at this time, we're not in a position to offer dollar for dollar refunds and then allow you. And then also we want to think about, we don't want to stop your progress towards gaining your, your examination progress. We think it would be easier for you to reschedule rather than have to wait, get a seat, get your refund back, then go back in and potentially be shut out because you don't have a seat credit and you have to purchase it. That's extra time on the process. Is there anything you want to add with that, Jared? Anything I missed?
No, I think you made some really good points there, in that what we do is we understand you're on a path to licensure, and we know that path includes taking that ARE division that you had scheduled. It is very frustrating if you've had to reschedule multiple times. And admittedly, Nick and I and Cassandra, we've all been some of the people behind the scenes that have been going in and adjusting your eligibilities and then applying that new seat credit. And I will tell you, I feel it when I'm going down that list and I'm making those changes. And I'm like, I mean, I've seen candidates have to reschedule 3 exams in the same month. And then unfortunately, I see them on the spreadsheet like another month later. I'm just like, oh, like I know this is not an enjoyable moment. But we're here to keep supporting you in getting this license. And this license means getting this ARE done.
So thinking back to just a few minutes ago, there was something that Jared referred to as ARE 5.1. Do you recall that, Jared?
I think I've said that a couple times today.
A couple times. Okay, so Jared has said it a couple times, but all our candidates are wondering, what's the timeline for ARE 5.1?
And you know what? I would love to be able to today, like, great news, we're going to launch ARE 5.1 on this day. And right now, I cannot give you that answer because I don't know it. And I said the exact same thing to our board of directors last week, is that what I know is I know the stuff we have to get done to be able to launch a 5.1. And so we've got that level of work laid out. But what we have is we have a couple of dependencies in this early phase of identifying how to restructure 5.1 and making that decision about what network we're going to deliver it in. So like, again, do we continue with Prometric? Do we look at other opportunities that are out there? Once those 2 decisions are made, and we're going to be making those decisions very quickly, once those 2 decisions are made, then we're going to be able to come back and say, okay, here's when we see a 5.1 being able to launch. But right now, in all honesty, if I gave you an answer to that question, Nick, I would be making up a day and I would have very little ability to live up to it.
So along the lines of 5.1, we have a question about the current software in ARE 5.0. Is NCARB, during this slowdown of testers, are we making improvements to that software and the way it is delivered? Or are those updates going to come with ARE 5.1?
So I'll jump in because so what I know is we are not stopping making updates to 5.0. We are actively working with the company that creates and delivers the exam through that test driver. We actually have a meeting with them later today because we have a wish list of items that we know will make life better for candidates. And so we keep talking to them about, let's make this change and let's make that change. And we're going to keep doing that. So it's not like we're going to be like, oh, 5.0 doesn't matter anymore, put that on the shelf. No, absolutely. 5.0 is still the exam that we know most of you are likely going to be taking, and we want to keep making improvements to that.
Okay, Cassandra, I'm going to jump over to you. How are we handling candidates who might need some relief with record fees and help as we work through these difficult times? Is there something NCARB is providing or helping with? Reducing fees, assistance?
That's a good question. And I know we have received many calls and many emails in reference to, hey, I'm experiencing some hardship due to the pandemic. How can you help us? And we take every call like that individually, and we look at the circumstances and we offer as much concession as we can. So right now, if you are due for a renewal, we are waiving renewal fees, and we're saying, hey, you don't have to pay that right now. Just wait. And when you are able and ready to pay, we would waive any type of reactivation fees as well. So we are here to support our customers during this trying time. And we recommend that they give us a call directly if they are experiencing any hardships, and we can support them.
Great. So we know today that there were exams that were previously scheduled in March that were canceled, in April that were canceled, and then now we're into May and there are some more exams that were canceled. Are we doing anything to provide priority to candidates who had their exams canceled, or are they viewed as a first-time tester signing up when we get into future exams being canceled by Prometric? How is that selection of the 50% process being administered by Prometric?
Okay, so I heard two questions there that I think have slightly different answers. So I will approach them from that perspective. The first question I heard was about priority for somebody who has to reschedule an existing appointment. And what I have to share with you is that there is no priority system built into the Prometric scheduler. It really does run on a first come, first serve availability. So if you have to have an exam rescheduled, that's one of the reasons NCARB actually is communicating out to you and saying, hey, this is happening, because we just did this with our June candidates that are going to have to reschedule. We said, hey, Prometric has informed us that your appointment was selected to have to be rescheduled. Go reschedule now, because by allowing you to self-serve, you can get ahead of the next person and the next person and the next person in the line. So, but there really is no way for us to somehow like put a flag on your account that says you get priority and you get access to this, whereas other people don't. That's not the way their scheduler works at all. So it truly is first come, first serve. So what I would suggest though is when you do get messages from NCARB, that if we're saying you've been impacted by this, that you do try to take action on that sooner than later, because when you do wait, you are starting to fall behind other people that are out there being proactive. I think there was a second part of your question, Nick, which was really around the 50% selection. And I see that as a completely different question, which is, so how did Prometric go about deciding, which June appointments need to be rescheduled? And we've also gotten the question in the past, like, well, why is Prometric getting to decide that and not NCARB? And what I will tell you is NCARB doesn't have the ability to look into the Prometric network and see all the different appointments that are scheduled. So what we know is we know of the ARE candidates that have an exam appointment scheduled. But what I don't know is, are you sitting next to somebody who's taking an accounting exam? And are they sitting next to somebody who's taking a medically related exam? And somebody next to them is taking a certification exam. So really Prometric owns the responsibility to calculate and determine that social distancing at the test center. So they've communicated that to us as 50% capacity. But what I shared with you earlier was also the fact that what we noticed was that only about 30% of our June appointments had to be rescheduled. And I think that's because what Prometric's obviously trying to do is they're trying to maximize the use of their test centers. Certainly also what I noticed from that list when it came in is that if you live in a large urban area, they seem to be more likely to have to be rescheduled than if you live in one of our remote locations. Probably simply because if you live in Los Angeles, because I saw a lot of Los Angeles, honestly, on the list. If you live in Los Angeles, there's probably a lot of people have exams scheduled already. And so then you are more likely to get selected to maintain that social distancing. So Prometric is doing it really to try to maximize seat time in the test center. I think that's actually a good news story for an ARE candidate, because since we actually have larger exam blocks of 4 hours and 5 hours, if they keep you in that test center, they've got somebody in there for 5 hours. If they get rid of you, unfortunately, but then try to bring in 2 or 3 other little ones, the problem they run into is then dealing with the cleaning and things like that in between the testers. So it could actually be a benefit that we have longer appointments than shorter ones for the ARE.
So you two have been really great. You've answered a lot of questions. I'm going to give you a quick breather here, and I'm going to take this next one. So it's about being able to test in a state outside of the jurisdiction that you're applying for initial licensure in. And yes, the good news about the ARE is it is the same exam regardless of which state you go to across this country. There are currently 55 member boards or jurisdictions where you can earn a license under the NCARB umbrella. Now, the exam is the same for everyone. A candidate could be taking an exam in Texas for a Louisiana license, and that would be fine. It's going to be the exact same exam. So for me personally, I know many of you know NCARB is based in Washington, D.C. I live in Virginia. I could go into DC, take an exam for a Virginia license. It's the exact same exam. It's also going to be the same Prometric experience. The check-in is going to be the same. The exam is going to be delivered on the same 23-inch monitor. Everything is the same about that experience. So for all of you who live close to maybe another state that you can get into, their test center, feel free to schedule it. It's going to be the same exam. and it's not going to make a difference. Along those lines, we're going to jump to scheduling the same exam for multiple dates. And Casandra, I'm going to go to you on this one. So if I'm a candidate and I want to schedule my programming and analysis exam for 3 different dates in the fall because I'm nervous that I might get booted, is that something I can do as a candidate?
Regrettably, you cannot do that. Your exam is assigned a very unique ID, and attached to that ID is the exam that is meant to launch for you at the test center. So you can't schedule multiple exams of the same exam for each different days. And I know that's not what people want to hear, considering where we are right now with rescheduling during the pandemic. But it's really set up. It's a very unique identifier that we do not have the capability to allow you to do that. But what you could possibly do is look at your study path and maybe think about scheduling other exams further out as you kind of work through your exam progress. But you won't be able to do what Nick has so eloquently supplied the question, but no, I'm sorry.
Okay. We're going to jump back to seat credits. We have a question about extension times for seat credits. So many of our viewers here probably know that if you purchase a seat credit, it's good for 1 year. And within that 1 year, Jared, I believe you need to schedule an exam. So is there a thought, or has NCARB thought about giving an extension time on that 1 year? And if not, is there a strategy for candidates to not feel like they need to schedule their exam within that 1 year period?
Sure. So I'll take those questions. First, we'll kind of go back to the beginning, which is a seat credit means that you have a credit for 1 year. And during that 1 year, you don't have to take the test. And I always like to clarify this. So let's say you're granted a seat credit on May 1st. That doesn't mean you have to take a division by the next May 1st. What that means is you have to use that seat credit to schedule an appointment before you get to, like before May 1st runs out, before the seat credit expires. But you could log in next April 30th and you could schedule an appointment for October of 2021, right? So realize you have a lot of flexibility around the seat credit. But that being the case, there certainly may be some candidates out there that purchased seat credits 11 and a half months ago. Like it could be happening, right? And so you purchased a seat credit 11 and a half months ago because you had this perfect plan to do your test in the spring of 2020, and then this whole thing has blown up your plan. If you log into the scheduler right now and you cannot find an available time, because again, let's say you're in a very populated area, the test centers are really just like hammered, and you can't find availability, call NCARB. Like, reach out to customer relations. Our customer service team is going to work with you to say, okay, we totally get it. I understand this situation. We're not going to be like, well, guess you lost your seat credit. There's no way we're going to say that. What we're going to do is we're going to like totally understand the situation. What we will likely do is we're just going to let that seat credit expire. That's the easiest thing to do, honestly, from a systems perspective. And we'll just apply a new seat credit to your record at no cost. That would, again, give you a whole nother 12 months after the fact to use that to schedule a future appointment.
This next question, Casandra, is right up your alley. Being a customer service specialist, we have a question about how NCARB is working with Prometric to provide the best customer service to ARE candidates. Would you like to address that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the great things about Prometric is we are assigned an account manager, and we talk with her daily. And she is very responsive, and she's helping us to navigate social distancing concerns, questions about scheduling, canceled exams, rescheduled exams, everything that has come up during the pandemic. We've worked really closely with our Prometric partners to ensure that our messages are going out quickly to our customers, and so they are aware and can plan appropriately.
So Nick, I want to layer on a little bit to that response too, though. So one thing I will say, though, first of all, I'm going to apologize to any candidate that's had some confusion in the last month or month and a half about NCARB communications. Because what did happen over the course of the last month to month and a half is that NCARB was communicating with candidates the information we had, and Prometric was communicating with candidates directly with information they were having. And the reality is sometimes we weren't at NCARB getting the information in a timely way to get ahead of the Prometric message. So we do know that there was some confusion created over the last 6 weeks. Absolutely. And so some of the changes we have made with Prometric is once that happened, I mean, clearly, honestly, NCARB was not happy because we don't want you to get, disjointed messaging. We don't want you to be confused. So we went back to Prometric and said, okay, here's the deal. The deal is if you're going to take action on any NCARB candidate's exam that's scheduled, you need to tell us. Because Prometric had sent out some emails that I know were not very good emails because they said, your exam has been canceled. And most ARE candidates immediately went, what exam? Like, on what day? What are you talking about? And so what we've done is we've told Prometric, like, if you want to, if there needs to be action taken on a scheduled appointment, let us know. We are then going into your record. We're pulling the relevant information that will tell you which division's being impacted, what day that you have that appointment scheduled for, and then we're communicating with you directly. That way you're going to get an email from NCARB that says, unfortunately, your programming and analysis appointment scheduled for June 17th has to be rescheduled. And here's what you can do about it. And then we give you more information. So we have made some changes to our communication strategies with Prometric. The one thing I will share with you, though, is if you do have an appointment scheduled in June as a candidate, Prometric is going to start communicating with you directly to share that information about test center procedures. So expect an email that's going to say, hey, again, it's rather generic in nature, so just don't expect it to be super personalized, but it is going to say, you have an exam appointment scheduled. These are the policies that we're putting in place inside of your local test center. And they're actually asking you to accept those terms for going in and testing. And that's when you can read more about the face covering. You can read more about how they're going to manage social distancing inside the test center.
So Jared, I'm coming right back to you on this one. So going back to our very first question that we had here today was about remote proctoring. Okay. And so candidates want to know, they're ready to test now. And is there a way that NCARB can fast track remote proctoring?
Well, we are going to try to fast track remote proctoring. I will fully admit that. The reality, as I said, like over the course of the last 3 weeks, NCARB has done probably more work on remote proctoring. Well, honestly, we have definitely done more work on getting remote proctoring to ready to be launched than we had done previously. Before it was all research and investigating and how does it work and how could we make it work. Now we're in the, okay, how do we pivot and make this happen? And so we've had extensive meetings with our psychometricians already to say, how can we make changes? The psychometricians have already responded back with a scope of work that says, here's what we can look at. Here's how we can figure out ways to modify the item count. Here's how we could look at timing. Here's how we could look at different delivery options. So literally in the last 3 weeks, more has happened on remote proctoring related to the ARE than the previous 11 years and 8 months that I have worked at NCARB. And so Nick, unfortunately, has the benefit of working with me on a day-to-day basis. Nick also understands that in his near future is a lot of efforts related to getting to ARE 5.1 and getting this launched. And so, like I said it earlier, I can't give you a day when we're going to do it, but I will tell you, our goal is to get this launched as soon as we can and maintain the validity of this exam, because that's the other thing we have to make sure we touch on from a testing perspective. No candidate would ever want to go in and take the ARE and then come to find out that for some reason, a state licensing board is not going to accept that exam result to grant them a license. That would be a total heartbreaker. And so one of the things we're doing at NCARB is we have to make sure that when we launch 5.1, that it is a completely accepted by every member board, that when they see your score report, there's going to be no question. They're going to be like, this person passed the ARE, they've completed the architectural experience program, they've got the necessary experience or other education, and we're going to grant this person the license. And that's what we want for every one of you. I want every one of you to get that license, and I do not want the exam to be the thing that's going to get in the way of that.
So it looks like we have 2 last questions, so I'm going to hand each of you one. So the first one, Cassandra, this is for you. Can NCARB lower the price for a seat credit?
Yes, in certain circumstances, we absolutely can lower the price of a seat credit, and that depends on individual circumstances. So, for example, um, we turned off rescheduling fees early in March. And some customers had already rescheduled before we had made the decision to shut off rescheduling for everyone. So, in those circumstances, we were able to give those people discounted seat credits as a concession for having to pay for rescheduling fees. So, we do have that opportunity to do that for our customers and candidates.
And then one for you, Jared. So this individual has had multiple errors and issues while in the testing center with the software. Is NCARB looking at making any adjustments to that software in the future?
We are. First of all, again, I'm sorry that you had those errors. And the fact that when you said multiple errors, if you were watching my face, I kind of cringed a little bit like, oh my gosh, that's not good. We certainly don't want any candidate to experience an error in the test center. We do know with the technology that it can happen and that it does happen. That is the work we are continuing to do with our delivery vendor right now, is we're constantly looking at ways to make improvements. Again, I know 6 months ago, we actually went through a really bad spell where there were some different updates that launched in the test center, created some problems for our candidates. We worked through getting those corrected, which actually increased the performance of the exam delivery in the test centers. We still want it to get faster, right? I think we all do, right? Every one of us, we click on something and we just want it to load immediately. So we're going to keep working on performance issues. It's always top of mind for us because we know in a long exam like this, performance issues really can matter.
So since we're running out of time, I'm going to ask each of you to provide one key takeaway for all the ARE candidates out there. Cassandra, do you want to start off?
Absolutely. So, one of the things I'd like to recommend for our candidates, if you are selected to test in June or July based on social distancing standards, give yourself some extra time when you arrive at the test center. 30 minutes may not be enough for the check in procedures that they've put in place for COVID-19. So, please be patient and flexible with that timing.
Jared?
And, well, I'm sorry, one last thing. I'm sorry. And if you have any issues, any concerns, please give us a call. We are here to help you from 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're open for emails 24/7.
Let's go over to Jared.
So Nick, the one tip I want to give to candidates is I want them to remember that they're resilient. And I was thinking about this earlier in that the fact that you have gone through an architectural education in all likelihood, one, is definitely a level of resilience as you've managed studio and getting projects done and all of those things. And now you're out, some of you, I know you're out, you're working in the office and you're probably managed working from home, balancing family, balancing other responsibilities. And that resilience is in you. And I completely understand how frustrating this disruption has been to a lot of our candidates. But I also want just to take the time to remind you that I know you're resilient. I've had the benefit of working at NCARB long enough to go out and meet a lot of candidates face to face. And every single time, right, I'm impressed by what people are accomplishing out there. I know this has been disruptive, but what I also know is the people I've met are the kind of people that they're working the problem. They're going to be right back in there. And when things start to settle down, you're going to get through this exam and you're going to get that license.
Well, that's excellent, Jared. Thanks for providing that feedback for all of our candidates out there. So in conclusion, I just want to thank everyone again for joining us and submitting all these great questions. If there are questions we didn't get to, and I'm sure there are, we're going to follow up on our NCARB blog and our ARE 5.0 community. And also as a reminder to all of you, this webinar is being recorded and it's going to be placed on YouTube. But remember, this is what we know as of today, April 30th. And as we've seen things in the past, we know that these can change by the day. So it's really important for you all to stay connected with us. And what I mean by that is check our website, check our blog, check our ARE 5.0 community. I'm on there. I would love to hear from you. Check out our social media channels. And also feel free to give Cassandra and her team and our customer relations department a call. They would be happy to help out. And also make sure to subscribe to the NCARB updates email list if you haven't already. Thanks again for joining us. We all appreciate you being here, asking questions, and we hope to see you all again next time.